excited to be here today and to be a part of the festival. It's wonderful. And I'm just going to tell you a little bit about some of my books and where the ideas came from. It was an interesting thing just to kind of think about this talk and where ideas come from, because they come from all sorts of places. And I'm going to show you a little bit about how my brain works towards a story. So we're going to launch right in. And maybe if we could turn off a little bit of light, would that work?
Yeah, I'm going to do it from down
here. Okay. So this is my all-time hero, Beverly Cleary. And when I was in second grade, I was reading a Beverly Cleary book. I'm not sure which one, but I remember having the realization all of a sudden that a human being put these words down on paper. You know, and I thought at that time, I can picture the classroom, I can picture the setting. I remember thinking, I want to do that when I grow up. And so I loved Beverly Cleary, and in fact, probably about 4 years ago, I looked Beverly Cleary up and discovered she was like 90, she's probably 96 right now. But I wrote to her. I wrote her a letter because authors write fan letters too, and I tend to write those. I write book reviews. I love to talk to authors. So I wrote her a letter, and I told her what she meant to me and how she inspired me to write a book. And I said, if you were my neighbor, I would bake you a pie and bring you a bouquet of flowers. And then she wrote back, and it's this little postcard, and it's very faint handwriting, but she says, appreciation is much better than a pie or a bouquet. So this is just a treasure to me, and she inspired me a lot of years ago, and she still does today. For my ideas, these are my big kids. Becky just showed us her little kids, but these are my big kids, but at one time they were little. And most of my story ideas did come from what was happening at home. This is our oldest son, Will, and then behind, it looks like I'm wearing the same outfit, and then behind, sometimes you get one outfit and you just wear it all the time. That's our oldest son, Adam, in the back, and he's married to Janelle, who is expecting our first grandson, my husband, Darwin, our daughter, Hannah, and her husband, Noah. And so most of my picture books, especially in those early years of writing, came from what was happening at home. In fact, I had a set of books, little bunny books, and Little Bunny has problems, all sorts of different little problems, and he has problems sharing, he has trouble going to preschool, different things like that. But one of the books was Dry Days, Wet Nights, and it was one of my very first books. And it was written, of course, because I had a child who had a problem with bedwetting. And I remember when the publisher asked me who I wanted to dedicate the book to. Now, that presented a little bit of a quandary, so I just did a generic to my family. So you have to be careful sometimes when you write about your children and their little, growing up issues. So in terms of ideas, this was a kind of a recipe I found years ago, and I just think it really fits in a lot of different ways. Writers write what they know, remember, and imagine. So you think about the things you know a lot about. You think about things that have happened to you in your past that you've experienced, and then you can add all sorts of imagination and details to it. So I'm going to unpack one of my books and show you kind of how this recipe actually works out. So it's this book, Those Shoes. And Those Shoes came out about 4.5 years ago, I think. And how this book came together, though, it took many, many years for this whole story to kind of coalesce. Years ago, I wanted these shoes, and I would have done, and they're right here, I would have done anything to own a pair of these shoes. And in fact, these are those shoes from the show Starsky and Hutch, and I was in 6th grade. These are actually size 11. They're the only size that they had on eBay. So I have a pair of those shoes, but they still don't fit. So I think that's kind of fitting too. But I wanted these shoes, and I felt like everybody in my whole class, in fact, it felt like everybody in the whole world was getting these shoes. And my sister's here, right there. My folks didn't have a lot of money for things that we would necessarily want. It was more about need. And these shoes were just too expensive. So about a couple months ago, a friend from my 6th grade class sent me this photo. And this is a kind of an end of the school year party at a teacher's house. And in my mind, my memory said that every girl in my class had those shoes, okay? Now, when you look at this picture, there are 2 girls who have a pair of those shoes, but they were real popular girls. And so when popular girls have something, it feels very overwhelming. So I was really happy to get this picture. And when I go into schools and I talk to kids, I tell them, what is it, when you want something, does it feel like everybody else in the universe has it? And they say, yes, yes it does. So we can relate to that. So I wanted these shoes, and one day my mom took me out shopping. We found a knockoff pair that were blue and they had a stripe, and I thought, I kind of think these look like the real deal. So I wore them to school the next day, and you can picture what if kids noticed that they weren't the real deal, and they certainly did. So then I have that memory that happened, and then you fast forward many years to when I was a college student, and I was going to get some field experience. I was going to become a teacher, and so I had to go into a classroom and sit in the very back and just observe what was happening. So I sat in the back of this classroom, and it was in a school that had a lot of children who were living in poverty, and I just sat in the back, and a boy went out to recess, and he came in, and his whole shoe, it was a slushy Iowa day, but his whole shoe had come apart, much like this kind of situation. And so the teacher sent him to the guidance counselor and said, why don't you see if Mr. Alfrey has a new pair of shoes that you can wear, or a pair of shoes that you can wear. So this boy went to Mr. Alfrey, and he came back wearing a pair of shoes like this. So you can picture, I'm in the back of the room, this kid walks in with these, doty shoes, and everybody in the class laughed at him. And I thought, I felt so sorry for him, but I also remembered my own story. So then you kind of have that recipe again. Writers write what they know, what they remember, and then what they imagine. So I decided that I would write a story about a boy who wants a pair of shoes. But there were several things that had to go into this, and one of them was that I felt that he needed to actually find a pair of those shoes, but they needed to be too small. They needed to not fit, and he needed to just own them. So in the story, the boy buys a pair of shoes at a thrift shop, and they're like new, and he's so excited. He lives with his grandma. They're $2.50, and he owns them, but they don't fit. And then he notices that a friend, his shoes are falling apart, and he has to make the decision whether or not he's going to give the shoes or just hang on to them as a possession. And he ends up giving the shoes. So that's those shoes, and that's kind of how it unpacked. Oh, I don't know why that didn't quite, let's see. Well, this is supposed to say, writers write the kinds of stories that they like to read. And I think that's really true. I tend to write a lot of realistic fiction, and I love to read realistic fiction. I always have. And I'm just kind of curious, if I just mention different genres, especially, we have some kids here. What kind of books do you like to read? What kind of books trip your trigger in the library? Mystery fans, raise your hand. Just one, okay. Animal stories? Nolan, are you an animal story? Oh, there we've got one hand up there. Funny books, anything funny? I kind of like them, a good funny book too. Comic books or graphic novels? Nolan likes those, yeah, okay. Scary books. That's a big tall hand. Sports stories? Historical fiction? Yeah. Biographies? Yeah, I like that too. Poetry? Gosh, poetry in this group was pretty popular. Okay, did I leave anything out? Nonfiction, yeah, nonfiction. Yep, okay, all right. Well, writers do tend to write the stories that they like to read. And like I said, I like to read realistic fiction. I like to write realistic fiction. So I always tell kids on school visits that, think about those stories that you're going to reach for on the library shelf, and think about you writing that same kind of story. And that can be a really good source for ideas. Okay, I also like to write about animals, and I especially like dogs, and I love a good hard luck story. So I write about dogs in shelters. That's kind of that's a little bit of a theme with me. This is our dog Dixie, and this is our cat Carmen. Dixie is a Rottweiler mix that we got from the Humane Society, probably 6 or 7 years ago. And what happened in this story, we had a Shar-Pei golden retriever dog who was lovely, and her name was Peach, but she wasn't as good a dog as I thought she was until we got the next dog. I was like, oh. And when she died, we went to the Humane Society, and people told us, don't rush right out and get a new dog. Take your time, think about it, give yourself time to grieve. And we lasted exactly 24 hours without a dog in the house. And so we went to the Humane Society, and we were looking for a similar dog, but in puppy form. We were looking for this yellow, worried-looking, Shar-Pei mix. And when we got to the last cage, our son noticed this dog, and she was a 1-year-old Rottweiler mix, and she wasn't at all what we had gone in for, but we walked her, we fell in love with her, and the Humane Society had no information on her whatsoever. She was a stray. They found her running loose at George West State Park in Cedar Falls, and she was just skinny, no story. So we brought her home, and for about a year, we wondered what happened to this dog before she was ours. And so I wrote a story called Before You Were Mine, and it's about a little boy who wonders what happened to his dog before he was adopted from the shelter. And that came right from the questions we were asking at home. What happened to her before she was ours? And then this is her best friend, Carmen. And Carmen is a pretty fat cat with a brain about the size of a pea. And she pretty much thinks everything is her kitten, and she drags everything around in the house. And in fact, one day and pretends it's a kitten, and one time I was carrying a 10-pound bag of potatoes, and I dropped a potato out, and I didn't think anything of it, but then I came in the living room, and she's curled around the potato, loving the potato kitten. So anyway, I love to write about animals. I think kids like to read books about animals, and I'll show you a couple more of those. This is the P.S. Brothers, and this is, as you can tell, a dog book. And in this story, this would be Write What You Know, Remember, and Imagine. When our son was about 10 years old, he wanted a new bike, and he already had a good bike. And so we said, Will, you're going to have to figure out a way that you can make some money to get that bike. It was $169. And so we had always paid our children to clean up after our dog, and kind of on a per scoop basis. And so he decided that he would start a little business, and he would take a flyer. He made these kind of comic-y flyers, and he took them around to all the neighbors, and he said that he would clean up after their dog if they would pay him. And he had so many customers that he made $169 in about 5 weeks. So, and as soon as he earned the money and bought the bike, you can imagine what happened to the business then. And for years, our neighbors would, we'll still do it. And he's like 16, and no, he wasn't interested in that. So I had this business that I really wanted to put in a book, but I knew that I needed more to that story. And so enter 2 boys that I met. I volunteered and ran kind of a volunteering program at a very under-resourced school in our community. And we ran soccer teams, and we ran a clothes closet and things like that. And I met 2 boys who were best friends and cousins. And they lived a very scrappy life. In fact, the one boy actually lived in a camper in his grandmother's backyard with his father. And what really impressed me about these 2 boys is their deep friendship. They would say to each other, you've saved my life 3 times, and I've saved yours twice. They just had this camaraderie, this brotherhood that was so awesome, and I really wanted to put them in a story. So I had the dog cleanup business, and I had the 2 boys. So I had those 2 parts, but then there needed to be a 3rd part. And that came a few years later when I was traveling in a neighborhood, going down an alley, and I saw a man who was beating a pit bull. He had him tied to the bumper, and he was beating him, and I was filled with rage, and I called animal control about it, and I had noticed that for some kids, they look at dogs as protection, they look at dogs as identity, but they don't look at dogs as companionship. And so I wanted these boys to do something about that particular issue with dog fighting. So I had the funniness of the business, I had the 2 boys and the character there, and then I wanted them to actually do something about something big. have a big adventure that was a lot deeper than just raising money and buying a dog. So in the story, they want a dog. And they want it for the wrong reasons, but by the end of the story, they want a dog for exactly the right reasons. And then this is before you were mine that I had just told you about. And then this is the part when we said writers write what they know, remember, and imagine. This is kind of the imagination part. You know, I love fairy tales too, and so I just took the story of Cinderella and made it about a young princess who wants a dog who could become her best friend. And so this is Doggerella, who competes for the title. And then there's another book, I think that's one's for sale out there, that's another fractured fairy tale called Sleeping Bootsy. So and the only reason I wrote that book is because I had kids who would say to me, how come you don't ever write about cats? And I was like, because I don't love cats so much. But so the Sleeping Bootsy was the answer to that. So, okay. And I think that is it. We can turn the lights on. And I'm actually going to tell you a little bit about this book. And okay, there we go. And I'll read this to you here. This is Happy Like Soccer. And this is one of those write what you know, remember, and imagine. That same school where we were coaching soccer, one thing our volunteers noticed, that I noticed too, is that we had one girl who every week would want somebody in her family to be at her soccer game. And there was never anybody there for her. And we'd say, well, we're here and we're cheering you on and your teammates are here. And that wasn't it. She wanted her mother, she wanted her auntie, she wanted somebody there who knew her and could cheer her on. And so one thing I love about being an author is you can take a situation and you can that's real and you can give it a different ending. And so this is Happy Like Soccer is taking that real situation and then I gave it the ending that I wanted. So nothing makes me happy like soccer, picked for this new team with these shiny girls. My shoes have flames and my ball spins on this spread out sea of grass with no weeds, fields with no holes, and real goals, not garbage cans shoved together like in the lot by my apartment, where soccer means any kid who shows up can play. But nothing makes me sad like soccer, too, because the restaurant where my auntie works is busy on Saturdays, and she can't take time off for something like a soccer game. Early every game day, my auntie looks me over good. She brushes my hair, rubs my legs with lotion. She says, have fun and play hard, Sierra. I smile, but when she hugs me goodbye, I know she can feel me low around the edges. Then my ride comes, filled with laughing girls who know the jokes I don't. We weave past the empty lot and through my neighborhood and outside the city where the buses don't run. When the game starts, I do play hard and I do have fun, but my eyes have their own mind, spying the sidelines where families sit on blankets and wave from fold-out chairs. They cheer for me by the number on my uniform, not knowing my name. Every girl has someone there but me. Coach Marco high-fives me and he tells me he's glad I'm on the team. When he asks me if there's anything I need, I bite my lip without meaning to and tell him no. After the game, we ride back home into the city through my neighborhood and past the empty lot and right to the restaurant where my auntie brings me chicken and noodles, and on her break we talk about the game and what happened as best as I remember. Then on Friday, my auntie tells me that her boss has heard me talking. He asked her if she would like to trade her shift on Saturday for one on Sunday so she could come to my last game. What did you tell him, I ask. My auntie laughs. I said, yes, of course I would. Then we dance a made-up dance in the kitchen and bake a cherry cake, the way we always do when there's celebrating going on. That night, I am so excited, I dream about soccer. In my dream, I am running so fast that I lift off the ground a little bit. Even my ball is in the air. Flying dreams mean you're feeling fine, my auntie says in the morning, and she's right. My auntie and I traveled to the game together, riding on one bus, past the empty lot, then another through the city, then walking the rest of the way to the fields. But when the game is ready to start, I feel it. Fat raindrops plopping, then thunder starts its show, and in the distance, lightning. Coach Marco gathers us up quick and says the game is canceled, but will be rescheduled. I swallow, sure that the rescheduled last game will be on a Saturday, sure it will be outside the city, sure my auntie's boss won't do 2 favors right in a row. Coach Marco gives me and my auntie a ride back home. In the car, my auntie sits by close, her hand warm, covering my knee. At home, we play cards and eat cherry cake and look at old pictures. My auntie pulls out the funny ones to make me feel better, and I would, except I'm thinking hard. When she tucks me in, I'm still thinking about the empty lot by my apartment and my auntie's day off being Monday, and I wonder if maybe this time, for this last game, I can answer Coach Marco's question about if there's anything I'm needing with something true. My auntie is asleep, so I tiptoe to the kitchen. My heart is thumping hard, the way it does when my teacher calls on me, even when I haven't raised my hand. I dial the first part of Coach Marco's phone number and hang it up, shaky. I try again. Coach Marco answers. I take a breath, and I tell him I'm sorry for it being late. And then I say my idea fast and I'll run on that maybe the game could be on Monday, and maybe it could be by the lot by my apartment, and maybe my auntie could come. Coach Marco is quiet, listening. Then he says, I'll make some calls. I can't promise, Sierra, but I'll let you know. It is a long time until morning. City sounds are all around, mixed with my auntie's steady breathing and my own self noisy with what I want to happen. Later, Coach Marco shows up at the lot to see for himself. He tells me that my idea was a good one. This will work for everyone, he says, smiling. I run home, skipping the stairs 2 at a time. My words spill the story, and my auntie tips my chin up and looks at me, both amazed and proud. You did that for me, she says. I nod, and she pulls me close. For me, too. At the last game, there are families on blankets and people waving from fold-out chairs. There are faces from my neighborhood, too, on bikes stopping by with all the others. And I hear my name because they know me, not just my number. And above the rest, I hear my auntie's strong voice cheering me on. And I run so fast that this time I know for real I'm flying. That's happy like soccer. Well, thank you. We can take a couple questions. Are we okay? Okay, yes. Anybody have any questions at all? All right. Oh, do you have a question? Well, you know, at the end, when she's running so fast, when it says she knows for real she's flying, have you ever gotten a new pair of tennis shoes? Never gotten a new pair of shoes? And you feel like when you're running that your feet kind of pick up a little bit, like you can really run fast in those new shoes? I think she's so happy that she feels like she's flying a little bit. It's cool to talk to a pirate, answer a pirate's question. I'm like looking at your face. Yeah, any other questions? Did you have one? Yeah, I've got a middle grade that my goal was to get to about 25,000 words, and I'm 25,000 words, but I'm not anywhere near done. I've got to round this curve big time, so that's what I'm working on currently. So, yeah. Anything else? Nolan. How long did it take me to write this book? Happy Like Soccer probably, once I started, was probably my shortest one because it was in my head for so long, so probably only a few months to finish this one, and then some revisions back and forth. Yeah. Okay. Anybody else? All right. Well, thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of the festival. It's been really nice talking to you. Thank you.
Maribeth, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.